Let's get going with chapter 29. It's called Deception. Just then, a bell tolled across London. Bong! It was the unmistakable sound of Big Ben. Count! Hissed the Queen through the hole in her floor and Alfred's ceiling. Alfred listened as the bongs continued. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, he whispered. Not tonight, then, said his mother. What isn't tonight? We have to listen out for 13 bongs. 13? Why would there be 13? He asked, not unreasonably. That's the signal. For what? Revolution. The boy couldn't believe his ears. The Queen was a traitor after all. So you are a revolutionary, spluttered Alfred. Yes, she replied calmly. But destroying St. Paul's Cathedral, how could you? That wasn't me, protested the Queen. I don't understand. Please, you must believe me. I would never ever do such a thing, and neither would the revolutionaries. How can you be so sure? There is no reason for them to attack their own city. All they want, and I want, all the people of this country want, is to end this evil rule. But if you or the other revolutionaries didn't destroy St. Paul's Cathedral, then who did? The Lord Protector, she replied coolly. But why would he do that? Asked Alfred. It just doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. To destroy St. Paul's Cathedral? No one would ever suspect the Lord Protector of doing that himself. Instead, he could put the blame on the revolutionaries, on me. Frame us as the evil ones and not him. And with me locked up here in the tower, the Lord Protector has free rein of the palace so he can carry out his wicked plans. He is an evil dictator, and he must be stopped. Alfred, will you help us? Before the boy could answer, he heard the sound of bootsteps approaching. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Guards, he hissed. Go, 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 implored Mother, so he jumped down from the bucket and leapt onto a pile of hay. Thud. And there he pretended to be asleep. Alfred even did his best to snore, though as far as he knew, he didn't snore in real life. The boy didn't dare open his eyes. He could hear the guard stop at his cell and then move off. Stomp, stomp, stomp. He opened his eyes again and heard voices from his mother's cell above. How dare you barge in here like this? Said the Queen. Tell us where your friends, the revolutionaries, are hiding, someone with a very deep voice said. I don't know. Answer the question, he barked. I swear I don't know, she replied. Come on now, let's not play games. I command you, as your Queen, to release me from this God-forsaken place. Oh, the noise, the people. You must set me free at once and let me return to the palace. Orders of the King himself, came the barked reply. The King is not well enough to give orders. I know him better than anyone. Please. The man was having none of it. Orders of the King. All traitors are to be imprisoned in the tower. I am not a traitor. Oh, yes, you are. And you know where the revolutionaries are hiding. Tell us, and we can wipe out the traitor scum once and for all. For the last time, I don't know, exclaimed the Queen. Then this calls for extreme measures, said the voice. Torture me again if you like. I still won't know anything. Then there was a long, low laugh. Oh no, we're not going to torture you, I have a much better idea about who we can make suffer. When you hear their screams, you will be sure to tell us everything you know." "Who?" demanded the Queen. "Tell me who, you brute." "Your son, of course." Chapter 30. The Executioner. Moments later, the boy was dragged kicking and screaming from his cell by 2 royal guards. They hauled him to one of the turrets at the top of the Tower of London. A turret is one of the towers that you would get on castles that have the battlements at the top of them. Thunderclouds rolled overhead as a wicked wind whipped through the sky. There, on the turret, was the Queen, squashed into a metal cage that was swinging in the air. Creak, creak, creak. The cage was something that had been around since medieval times. It was used for coffin torture. The cage was just big enough for the Queen's body, but not big enough for her to move. The expression on her face betrayed the agony that she was in. "Mama!" cried Alfred upon seeing her. "Don't you dare hurt my son!" yelled the Queen at the guards. They threw the boy to his knees. He scrabbled up and raced over to his mother. He hurled himself at the cage, his little fingers poking through, desperate to comfort her. "Be strong, Lionheart," she whispered. "Be strong. We are going to get out of here alive, I promise you." Before the boy could reply, a giant of a man, his face hidden by a black hood, dragged him away. He was the executioner. "You are coming with me, little one," he said in his deep, rough voice. This was the same man who had been interrogating the Queen in her cell not long before. "No!" cried Alfred. But the executioner was so much stronger than him. Soon the boy was tied to a huge wooden wheel. Yet this wasn't just any wheel. This was a breaking wheel, another instrument of medieval torture. A giant wheel that revolved a person as their limbs were broken, one by one. Without a word, the executioner ensured that Alfred had been secured properly by yanking on the ropes around his ankles and wrists. "Ah!" exclaimed the boy as his skin was burned by the ropes. However, the torture was yet to begin. "Revolve the wheel!" called out the executioner, and the royal guards did his bidding. Slowly, Alfred began turning on the wheel. He felt dizzy as he hung all the way upside down. As the wheel revolved, he started to feel sick. "Now, your magical majesty, tell us where the revolutionaries are hiding," began the executioner, "or your darling little boy will be crushed to death." "For the last time, I don't know what you're talking about," shouted the Queen. "I would tell you if I knew anything, I promise, but I don't. Put me on that thing if you must. Not him, I beg you. He's just a child." "I wonder if when one of your son's limbs is smashed to pieces, it might just jog your memory." "No, please," she pleaded. "I don't know anything, I swear." The executioner shook his head before holding aloft an iron hammer, ready to strike the boy and smash his bones to smithereens. Alfred shut his eyes tight. He couldn't bear to watch what was about to happen. "Stop!" called out the Queen. "I will tell you everything I know." "I knew you'd see sense," replied the executioner. "Now, untie my son and I will talk." The executioner was not used to taking orders. The man bristled and paced over to the cage. "Where are the revolutionaries hiding?" he demanded. "I said, untie my son first," said the Queen sternly. Alfred was amazed that his mother could retain her composure at such a time. The executioner nodded to the guards, who began loosening the ropes around the boy's wrists and ankles. "Don't tell them anything, Mama," pleaded Alfred. The Queen chose to ignore her son. She waited for him to be freed from the breaking wheel. The boy's eyes were streaming, and he was completely out of breath. He had to be helped up by one of the royal guards. "Your precious prince is free," began the executioner. "Now tell me what you know, right now." The man swung the head of his hammer into the palm of his hand. Thwack! A tiny bit too hard. He had hurt himself. "Oh, ouch," he said, no doubt wincing underneath that hood. "I am waiting." Next, he dragged the end of the hammer slowly down the bars of the cage. Clunk, clank, clink. "Please, I am a very busy man. I have a whole tower full of prisoners to torture, and a list of executions as long as your arm." The Queen stared straight at Alfred and nodded her head. He struggled to understand what she meant. Without giving the game away, he furrowed his brow as if to ask, "What?" The Queen nodded her head again, tilting it to one side. This, the Prince thought, must mean she wanted him to get the executioner's attention. "I will tell you where the revolutionaries are," announced Alfred. The executioner turned around. The Queen smiled. Her plan was working. "Will you now, you lusty little wretch?" asked the executioner, not sounding at all convinced. "Or are you just playing games?" With all eyes on the Prince, the Queen was free to rock her cage to and fro. In a few swings, the cage was gathering momentum. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Alfred did his best to let his face portray absolutely nothing of this at all, which was hard, as it wasn't every day that he saw his mother swinging around in what looked like a giant bird cage. "Yeah, the revolutionaries have a number of secret bases around London," continued Alfred. "They hide in what used to be underground stations." The executioner rolled his eyes. "That is old information, and you well know it. The rats were driven out of those sewers years ago." Now the cage was swinging violently, so violently, in fact, that it was nearly reaching the executioner. "Executioner!" called out the Queen. He turned around. What? Only to be whacked on the head by the cage. Clonk. Oof! He toppled over and fell off the top of the tower. Ow! Plunging into the river below. Splosh. "I can't swim!" he cried. And we'll carry on with chapter 31 next time. Bye.